one more before morning tea. The hearings panel report to the council on the Christchurch City Council cemeteries bylaw. Again, Mike Davidson, chairperson.
Thank you. So this bylaw review received 48 submissions, with 32 of them around Diamond Harbour, and not being able to pre-purchase there, and obviously the small number of green burial plots in Diamond Harbour. The panel has made a few minor amendments to the bylaw proposal. In addition, we also like to make a slight amendment to one of the panel's recommendations due to a unintended consequence of it around 2A, which was around the disinterment and looking to use qualification, making sure they have appropriate qualifications. The wording up there actually would exclude a lot of people that don't have that qualification but actually are suitably qualified to perform the role. So I've passed some wording across to Joe for an email earlier. I'll just move on while we... Yep. So obviously the biggest thing that came out of that, there was a lot of other technical stuff that had to be changed through the submission stuff, which was sorted out, but the biggest concern that was raised from submitters was around Diamond Harbour, and obviously there was a lot of discussion. It's obviously a very sensitive issue, but you know, citywide there's a capacity issue with cemeteries, and it's something that needs to be looked in, and we've addressed that in recommendation number 3. But the advice from staff, which we took, is obviously if we allowed the pre-purchase of burial plots in Diamond Harbour, they would actually be exhausted extremely quickly. Even allowing for the pre-purchasing of plots where there may be a partner there would also create that to happen as well. So therefore the panel did not change that part of the bylaw and therefore there'll be no pre-purchasing of plots at Diamond Harbour. But as outlined in recommendation 3, as part of that citywide review of the capacity within cemeteries around Christchurch, we'll be looking at the possible redevelopment of Diamond Harbour. You know, this is obviously going to be an issue moving forward, especially with green burial plots becoming more popular. So this will give an opportunity for staff to report back to see how this is working.
Yep. Hang on. Are you amending the actual wording from a hearings panel decision?
Yes, we've gone through the... It's an additional bit on the bottom of 2A.
Yeah.
Which we have.
It's just as a matter of course. We can't change the wording of a decision of a hearings panel. It has to go back to the hearings panel.
Yeah, we've had legal advice, and it was due to an unintended consequence of that.
Okay.
And so therefore we have relayed that to the other hearing panel members.
Is that okay? Yep.
So there was a memo that went to the whole hearings panel, who were happy that that be put to the council, that the council could adopt that wording, which is different from the hearings panel recommendation. So the hearings panel aren't changing their recommendation, but they are happy that the council can adopt a slightly different wording in the final resolution, which is suggested there, and it's been through the hearings panel.
Okay. Raf, Andrew, Glenn.
Yeah, talking about the green burial plots, was there any conversation about using red zone land for green burial plots, where the land doesn't really have any other use?
No, there was no discussion around that, but I think one of the important things is the fact that, and we've highlighted in 3, that we need to report back on the whole capacity issue of cemeteries across the city. Because there's only a few years before we're going to have a big issue. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with the pre-purchasing of plots, is everyone's taking them up, and then we've got these cemeteries with lots of vacant plots in there that have been pre-purchased for decades.
And also, secondly, just because we have a specific issue in Avonhead, were there any issues around lawn cemeteries where you can't have headstones, where that might possibly be changed in the future?
From recollection, I do not recall that, but I'll pass that across to Steve. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew, then Glenn.
Thank you. Capacity at Diamond Harbour has been alluded to by Mike and obviously formed part of the discussion at the hearings panel. The particular area where I'd be keen for us to show more compassion would be where the one partner has already been buried in a green burial plot at Diamond Harbour, and the ability to reserve a plot for the other partner in that situation. What would be the effect of doing that if we were to make a rule which said that, you know, once one partner is buried in the green burial plot at Diamond Harbour, realising there's limited space, we would allow for a second adjacent plot to be reserved or pre-purchased? What would be the effect of that? I mean, I'm very aware of some, you know, huge passion within that community and shortage of space in that cemetery, but I'd really like to see us get to a more compassionate approach than the one that we've achieved here. Can we just get some comment on that, please?
So the way that the green burial, people are buried in a green burial, has to be in order of burial. So it's the next rank off the cab, if you know what I mean. So once we have a burial, the next burial goes along, and it's to do with the way that they're not really marked out like a normal plot. So there's quite specific measuring, and if we did have a gap, it could there could be potential for exposure, so it has to be in order. So the 3 burials that we have had in the cemetery have been one burial after the other, so we can't have a burial and then leave a space for the partner. So
you've addressed my question in terms of the words adjacent to, but if we said in the same cemetery, what would be the effect of allowing for a plot to be pre-purchased when one partner has already been buried in that cemetery in a green burial?
So we have 12 plots, that's all we have in the green area at Diamond Harbour, and we've already had 3 burials. So if they did want another plot put aside for them for the future, half the burial plots would be gone straight away, and we'd only have 6 left.
So that would then lead to a position where we immediately needed to create more space for green burials, which may well be the right outcome anyway. Noting that Resolution 3 has been referred to, when is that reporting going to be done, and to what extent do you anticipate that will take into account the increasing popularity of green burials?
I would suggest that that report be brought to council at a time where...
Sit down, yeah.
Sure. I would suggest that we monitor the uptake of plots at Diamond Harbour Green Burial Area, and once the uptake of plots, so those are plots that are being purchased at the time of burial, approaching halfway point, 6 plots. That's sort of the key point where beyond that, those who have been buried already, the families of those people will not from then on have the opportunity to purchase a plot for their spouse or other loved ones within the family, because they're beyond halfway, if you like. So I suggest that we monitor the uptake of plots under the existing situation and report back to council when we're approaching 6 plots, so maybe when we're around about 5 plots, report back on the uptake of plots there in the green burial area and in the general part, standard part of the cemetery, and on the wider capacity issues of for the city as an overall picture as well.
Given that there's already demand for plots which is greater than, you know, the reason that we're taking a policy position of no pre-purchase is because we're anticipating that there's going to be a shortage of plots. So there seems to be an illogic to we wait to report on a shortage of plots until we know there is a shortage when we're already taking a policy position that's based on a shortage of plots.
Yes.
You're already planning green burial at
Yaldhurst.
Yes. I mean, there are other, at the moment, the last 2 burials we've had at the green burial area in Diamond Harbour, so that's burial 2 and 3 out of 12, have been from people outside the area of Diamond Harbour. We are planning a new green burial area at Yaldhurst Cemetery, so that, because that will be significantly a greater number of plots than at Diamond Harbour, we are proposing that it will be possible to pre-purchase there. So people from around the district will be able to purchase a plot, one plot at least, at Yaldhurst Cemetery. So that will then take some pressure off the city demand, the city-wide demand for green burial plots at Diamond Harbour. I'm
at a bit of a loss to know what to do here, because it sounds as though we're putting something in place through the approval of this document today, which, you know, if that green burial cemetery at Diamond Harbour was intended for the use of local people, and it was local people that really drove the fact that we have those green burial plots at Diamond Harbour, it seems as though we've got an unintended outcome, that those plots have been used by people from outside of the Diamond Harbour area. We're now going to entrench that in these documents, not allow for reservation or pre-purchase of sites so that partners can be buried together in that place. And at the same time, at some point, we will be doing a piece of work to say that there's a lack of capacity, and at some point, we'll be allowing green burials to take place at Yaldhurst. But we've got an immediate problem, which is that we're showing a lack of compassion to people that want to be buried in the same cemetery at Diamond Harbour in a green burial. I just don't know how we... I mean, my natural instinct is to send this back to the hearing panel for more work so that we can resolve this issue, given it feels to me like the outcome is the wrong one. But that's probably more of a legal question rather than a question for staff who are advising on cemeteries. If we did that, what would be the opportunity for the panel to direct that the review take place more quickly, the Yaldhurst green burial plots be taken up more, made available more quickly, or that Diamond Harbour be reserved for Diamond Harbour residents only, and that we do allow for pre-purchase? Would they all be good reasons for sending this back to the hearing panel for more work? I imagine there'll be more than 12 available at Yaldhurst.
Yeah, in all due respect, to say that the hearings panel was not compassionate around this issue is a little bit disrespectful.
No, I'm saying the rules aren't compassionate.
To actually what the hearing panel did. We obviously realised it was a very sensitive issue and discussed it at great length and took advice from staff. I would say that just because you don't live in Diamond Harbour doesn't actually necessarily mean you don't have a connection to Diamond Harbour or the area, so it gets a little bit tricky when you just try and say that only certain people are allowed to actually be buried in a cemetery. You know, it was not an easy decision to make, and we made that decision with good advice, and we understand how sensitive that decision would be. So, you know, it is a little bit disappointing to get it relitigated in council today. What we are aware, obviously, is there were 12, and at that stage 2 were used, and actually potentially the best way to actually allow the cemeteries the plots to be filled would be to allow it to be done naturally, as people did die, and it's probably the fairest way for everyone that would like to have a green burial plot, and that is the path that the hearings panel followed, using good advice.
Thank you. I can see the intention of 1A, but was any consideration given to funeral directors being members of the Funeral Directors Association of New Zealand in this putting together of the bylaws? So you've got there, and that's been suggested to be modified with a NZQA accreditation, but it's actually the follow-up. So there's no account, once they've got the qualification, there's no accountability, which the FDANZ, which has a code of conduct and code of ethics, would provide. So There's some cowboy funeral directors out there. Most are pretty good, but yeah,
there's not many. There wouldn't be very many that we wouldn't allow to have have a disinterment, because with a disinterment, all of the everything's run by the sextons, and literally the funeral director, they provide the paperwork and get a health licence, but everything is pretty much run by the sextons, and the funeral directors don't really have very much input into the disinterring. They just let them do their job, and they collect the body and take it away. So we really, there's very little that can go wrong with a disinterment, because the sextons are professionals, and they run the whole thing with them and the health department.
I've kind of misjudged the amount of time that this paper would take, so I'm going to have to call a halt to this and have an adjournment for morning tea. We've got our zone committees coming to make their presentation, and they were due to be here at 11:15, so I'm going to have to adjourn. I'm really sorry to staff, but I really am surprised at the extent of the questioning, and I do apologise, but we do owe it to the subject matter to go through it in a proper way, so I'll have to call you back after the zone committees have made their presentation, if that's okay with you. Thank you very much. All right, well,